Hey everyone, this is Ira Nicodemus, and today we are talking about how the USDA REAP grant can help rural small businesses and agricultural producers save up to 50% on the cost of their energy efficiency and solar projects. Let's get started. So my company, Holistic Utility Solutions, helps small businesses to save on their energy and utility bills through energy efficiency and solar projects. So the REAP grant is a great way to help offset that cost and make these a really attractive ROI. When you combine this with some of the other federal incentives and utility incentives that are available, you're essentially looking at getting the project almost completely paid for, which gives you the ability to complete the project, get it pretty much all paid for, and then you're saving that money down the road. So it can lower your overhead cost, increasing the profitability of your business, your farm, your ranch. So let's talk about some details today of how you go about applying for this grant, hopefully getting it, and then being able to implement these projects. So like I often do, we are going to be referencing a written version of this information. That's an article on our website. I'll link to that so you can go check that out, and we'll pull it up on the screen so you can follow along. So let's start by talking about the funding. The funding through the REAP grant. The REAP grant has been around for a long time, but with the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 that passed in August of last year, we're filming this in the middle of 2023, that increased the funding and increased the amount that these grants are. So now we're talking about up to a 50% grant. They also have loan security, but I think most folks are obviously going to be interested in the grant versus the secured loan. So we're going to mainly focus on that today. So the total funding that was allocated was just over $1 billion. Now, this is a competitive grant, so while $1 billion is a lot of money, it's not unlimited, so there is a process to apply. Now, as far as what this applies to, pretty much everything's broken down into either energy efficiency or renewable energy, which is, of course, mostly going to be solar, but it could also be wind and those type of things. So the minimum is going to be based on the project size, not the minimum grant, but the minimum project size. So if you look here, renewable energy, we need to be at least a $10,000 project. Energy efficiency, we need to be at least $6,000 project. Now, the maximum is $1 million for renewable. This is the maximum grant. And then on energy efficiency, it's $500,000. So let's say you had a really large project where you're doing a $3 million solar project, you'd be capped at that $1 million. Otherwise, you'll be capped at the 50% of the project cost that is covered through the grant. And pretty much any of the costs with developing, implementing the project are going to be covered, but you do need to have the application in and approved before you start spending money. You can't go back and recoup costs that you've already spent. Now, the value of the grant that you get is taxed as taxable income, but the good news is that means that you can also combine this with the investment tax credits that came through as part of the Inflation Reduction Act as well. So we have a whole series on the IRA and kind of what goes into these investment tax credits and the 179D tax deductions. So I'll put links to those videos, that video series as well. And then in the article, we have a written format, but just a quick recap. On solar projects, assuming you're under 1 megawatt, basically you can get 30% tax credit. That's a credit, not a deduction. And then you have these bonus credits. So 10% for using domestic material, which is basically US made material, 10% if you're in a low income area, 10% if you're in an energy community. So what this means is that if you were to get the REAP grant for 50%, and then you pick up, let's say, the base credit of 30, and then you're in a low income area, so you're at 40, essentially now you're at 50 plus 40, before we can start talking about the tax deductions or utility incentives. So the fact that we can combine these means that we can really get the cost down on these projects, making it a very attractive return on investment, even if you're in a spot where the energy cost is fairly low. So are you eligible for this REAP grant? So this is not designed for nonprofits, it's not designed for schools, and it's definitely not for residential. So this is going to be for rural small businesses or agricultural producers. So farms, ranches, things like that. And the way that it's defined, if you're talking small businesses, a rural area is somewhere that has a population of 50,000 or less. And if you look at this map here, you can go, I'll put a link here, I'll put it into the video description, punch in your address and get this exactly. But I just snapped Texas, since that's mainly the market that we serve. And you can see these yellow areas, those are the areas that it doesn't apply. So most of the state is going to be in areas with populations under 50,000. Even if you are in a county seat, for one of those more outlying counties, there's a good chance that the population of your county seat is under that 50,000 threshold. So a lot of the state is going to be covered here, but you do have to be there if you're talking the small business. Now, if you're an agricultural producer, there's more leniency on that. Basically, the 50,000 doesn't apply, but you do need to have at least 50% of your income coming through agricultural production. So a little bit more different, like if you were, let's say, a greenhouse or something that was in one of these areas that was over the population, you could still apply, but you have to check that eligibility a little bit closer. So what's covered that you can actually apply this to? So remember I said it's applied to two main things, renewable energy and energy efficiency. So we have a list here. On the top of the list, small and large solar systems, also wind systems. This is where a lot of it's going. They do have a carve out here where they're reserving some funds for things that are kind of less adopted technologies. So if you look at some of these things like hydrogen, hydropower, biomass, if you're a farm and you're looking at doing some sort of methane capture and things like that, these things could apply as well. So if it's a carbon neutral at the site, then that could apply to renewable. So most folks are probably thinking solar, maybe wind, but other things do apply. Now, on the energy efficiency side, this is also pretty broad, pretty much anything that will be energy efficiency. So whether we're talking about high efficiency HVAC, LED lighting, building envelope, insulation, windows, things like that, all those things would apply. So these are treated separately, so we'll basically be applying for each one, and they have those respective limits, but it's very broad within these categories of what we can capture. The 50% cost share will basically apply to anyone that is doing one of these energy efficiency or renewables. So again, I'm not going into all the nuanced detail here, but pretty much if you're doing some of these things, which most people are, you're going to get up to the 50% grant within the confines of those other limits that we talked about. Now, remember that we said that this is a competitive grant. So there is a scoring criteria. So when we put in the application, it's important that you're working with someone, a company like Holistic Utility Solutions, that will help you put together a package that's going to score well on the system. So if you look at the scoring here, out of 100 points, the amount of energy saved, generated, or replaced is a big chunk at 25. Also, the length of the payback period. So cost is important. Be careful with this, because sometimes when these lucrative grants are available, companies just come in and they might try to sell you a solar system at $4 a watt. Well, that's going to hurt the payback, which means it won't score as well. So even though you're getting half of that paid for, you might not get the grant if you don't have a competitive price. So someone else who comes in that can do that solar system for closer to maybe $2 a watt, that's going to help your application. So make sure you're still paying attention to the price and who you're getting, even though a lot of this will get offset by the grant. Some of the other things aren't in your control, and one of those is whether you're in a disadvantaged or distressed community. So this is just based on where you're at. And again, I took a snapshot of the overall state, so you can see that a lot of areas are going to be covered. And I also put a link. There's an ArcGIS map where you can go in, punch in your address, and see if you qualify for one of these as well. So that'll help your application if you happen to be in one of these areas. This is different than that sub 50,000 population. It gets layered in and it's weighted if you happen to be in one of these areas. Now, what are the deadlines? This is very important. Your last chance, the last review period, is going to be September 30th of 2024. However, don't wait till the end. So what they're doing here is we are currently in a quarterly system. So each quarter, they're taking applications all the time. So you don't need to wait till the end of the quarter. Doesn't matter if you go in early in the quarter, get the application in as soon as you can. And here's why. Each quarter, they're going to review and award. If you're not awarded one, you're automatically going to get reviewed in the following quarter. So the sooner you get it in, the more opportunities you have to get reviewed and hopefully get awarded. Now, I do believe that within the fiscal year, it'll automatically roll over. If it goes over the fiscal year, you'll need to resubmit. But the point is that right now we're sitting here, there's 6 quarters. We're sitting here at the end of July 2023. So we're in Q2. So this quarter will end September 30th, and then we pick up. So you have some time left to do these, but this money isn't going to be here forever. So make sure that we start working on this now. Obviously, it's a process to get it in, get it approved, and then build that project. I believe you have 2 years after approval to complete the construction, but we want to get these applications in as soon as possible. So why is it important to take a holistic approach. I touched on this earlier, but a few things. One, cost is still important. So make sure that when we look at this, we're thinking about the cost and how these different pieces fit together. The stronger you can put together that application, showing that you thought through things, you're taking a very well-reasoned approach to what you're doing for efficiency, as well as for renewables, that's going to help your chances. This also helps because maximized benefits are worth more. You saw that a big chunk of this, 25% of the scoring criteria, was based on the amount of energy that was saved. And then also there was the environmental offset and impact. So a lot of what they're grading on is how much of an impact are you going to have. So if you just go in and submit your application with a kind of a one-off piece, like, oh, I have some HVAC, I think I can get that covered, you may be missing opportunity because we can put together a bigger package that maybe includes better building automation, controls, lighting, some solar, put together that overall package, which will have a better chance of getting approved. And it also leads to our last point that you kind of only have one bite at the apple. Now you can submit again in a different fiscal year. So if you were awarded, there's a chance you could submit again one more time in the next fiscal year. But basically, with the amount of time we have left, that we're in this fiscal year and there's only a couple quarters in the next one, you really want to only put this in once and maximize it. So take a holistic approach, meaning that we're looking at everything. We're doing a good energy audit, good site assessment, really understanding your needs and putting together a really good, comprehensive, holistic package that will have a really good chance of getting approved and take care of all these needs at once. So what are the next steps in doing this? First of all, feel free to contact me. We can help you with all of this through the initial site assessments and efficiency through the application and then implementation of the work. But if you do want to go ahead and get started on some things, first of all, go to sam.gov. If you haven't already, get yourself a UEI. This is a fairly simple process, but it does take a little bit of time. You need to have one of these when you go to submit. So that's something that we can't really do on your behalf. So get your organization registered on sam.gov. The second piece that we can help with is completing an energy assessment. Now, on smaller projects, you might be able to do this yourself, there's a paperwork and a form that you'll go in. But on larger projects, they're really going to want to see that somebody with some experience. I'm a certified energy manager. The team that I work with, we have a lot of credentials and experience in this space. So that's going to help when you go through and show that it's a really solid report where we looked at your baseline usage. We know what you're reducing. The calculations are solid. They're going to see that and it's going to help your application. So you need to have one of these energy assessments, basically an energy audit done. Once you have all that, you can submit the application. We're not going into a lot of detail here because when you go to the link that we're posting, you'll go on to the federal website and you'll see there's a number of different forms. There's kind of different criteria based on size and you can navigate through that. So more detailed than we want to get to on this one, but that process is what you go through to submit it. And again, you can do that anytime. It will have to be reviewed at the end of the quarter. So if you get it in early in one quarter, you won't hear anything until after they do the review at the close of that quarter. So in summary, this is just an incredible opportunity if you are one of these qualifying small businesses in a rural area to be able to get pretty much all of these paid for and reduce your overhead expense from electricity for years to come. Imagine what that can do to your business's profitability if we're able to essentially completely remove the cost of electricity from your overhead. So we are based in Dallas-Fort Worth. My team, we are able to service pretty much all of Texas and then also into Oklahoma and Arkansas. So please reach out. We'd love the chance to work with you, to talk with you, guide you through this process. So look forward to talking to you then. Until then, God bless, and we'll talk again soon.